And we are recording. Let's get started. Um, I'm ready. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm really excited about today's presentation. In our last session, I invited you to start thinking about your why, your personal motivation for making changes to your lifestyle. And I also invited you to start thinking about your bone health. And this week, I want to invite you to start thinking about your protein intake. This is a really crucial component when it comes to bone health, which is our subject. So, at the outset, I also want to acknowledge that I know that there are a great group of people listening in here, and some of you lean more towards a high raw plant-based diet, and others follow a more typical omnivorous diet. And what makes this conversation really exciting for me is because no matter where you fall on that nutrition spectrum, I truly believe that there is something in this presentation that is beneficial for everyone. So, in my last presentation, we discussed exercise as foundational for bone health. And we looked at the studies that showed that a combination of resistance and weight-bearing exercises yield the best benefits. And then we discussed calcium and other essential vitamins and minerals for bone health and why Calci-Aim stands out as a next level calcium supplement. But today we're going to move on to the role of protein and anti-inflammatory nutrition in the quest for healthy bones. And I want to take a deep dive into two AIM products that will help you in this regard, namely ProPeas and Barley Life. So to start, I wondered if any of you have ever read through AIM's Healthy Cell concept. It's available as a download on their website. And in this Healthy Cell concept, AIM talks about 5 avenues that we can use to improve our health. And today we're going to dive into the food component. So AIM states, and I quote from the Healthy Cell concept download, a diet rich in whole foods, in fresh foods, in real foods can impact our lives more than almost anything. Exercise as well. I believe they're both up there together. AIM then goes on to emphasize that getting in those 5 to 7 servings of fruit and veg per day is essential. They emphasize reaching fiber targets of 25 to 38 grams a day, and they emphasize the importance of protein with a bias towards more plant protein and less protein that is high in saturated fats. They don't say eliminate it, but they do say eat less of it. So I thought because protein is so vital when it comes to bone health, I want to really dive into the reasoning behind AIM's position on protein, the why of these recommendations. So, protein is both a bone and a muscle builder. Remember from last week, we said that muscles and bones grow together in tandem. And so, when you're supporting one, you are supporting the other. And 50% of bone volume is protein, with collagen being a major part of the bone matrix. And without adequate protein, we can't maintain strong muscles or strong bones. Now, how does protein support bone health? It does it both directly and indirectly. So let's look at 3 ways. The first one is indirectly, and that is via muscle mass and strength. So stronger muscles equals stronger bones because of the muscle contractions that pull on the bone, stimulating bone remodeling and strengthening. And adequate protein helps preserve and build muscle, especially with aging, thus protecting against falls and fractures and osteoporosis. So you can think of your muscles as number one, protectors of bone, and number two, stimulators of bone. Okay, so that's indirectly. Now, protein supports bone health directly as well. And this is by supporting the bone matrix formation. So we said 50% of bone volume is protein, primarily collagen, which forms the scaffold that minerals like calcium and phosphorus bind to. And dietary protein provides the amino acids that are needed to build and maintain this matrix. Again, collagen production declines with age, and low protein can worsen this. It seems everything declines with age. Anyway, the third way protein can help our bones is by enhancing calcium absorption. So, a protein sufficient diet will increase calcium absorption. So, let's look at the muscle component a little deeper. I'm going into this because Chrysalis members often contact me about this because of questions they get from those who are into sports. They've got questions about proteins. They might say that they are very happy on their whey protein supplement or whatever. And so I want to dive into ways in which you can answer them as to why plant protein versus whey protein could be a good move, and how ProPeas particularly shines in this regard. So muscle growth, which is called hypertrophy, depends on muscle protein synthesis. And this is how your body builds new muscle fibers using amino acids from dietary protein. So when you exercise, especially resistance strength training, this damages muscle fibers, and then your body responds by repairing and rebuilding those fibers, making them both thicker and stronger. And protein provides the amino acids, especially leucine, which I'm going to get into later, which is needed for repair and growth. And this exercise component is crucial. Can you gain muscle by just eating more protein without exercising? The short answer is not meaningfully, but there may be some increase in lean body mass from protein sufficient nutrition. But while protein optimizes muscle gain, the stimulus for muscle growth is resistance training. So let's look at the different sources of protein. With ProPeas being a plant-based protein supplement, let's look at why plant protein really shines. Otherwise, AIM could have made a whey protein supplement, but they chose to make a pea protein supplement. Well, the reason that plant protein really shines is because it is associated with longevity on a far greater scale than other protein sources. Now, why do I say that? There was a recent massive study. It was titled Dietary Protein Intake in Midlife in Relation to Healthy Aging. And what they did with this study was follow almost 50,000 American-based women for more than 30 years. So this wasn't a quick 2-week study. It was 30 years from the women at the start of the study were in their late 40s. And at the end of the study, when they came to these conclusions, they were in their late 70s. And they wanted to assess how midlife protein intake affects healthy aging. So they assessed, for the sake of comparison, total protein intake, and then they assessed those with more animal protein, those with more dairy protein, and those with more plant protein, to see how these individually affect healthy aging as well. So how did they assess what healthy aging looks like? Well, it was measured by composite overall outcomes, and it also looked at individual outcomes. So they looked at four key areas. Number one, they assessed healthy aging by looking at freedom from major chronic diseases, including things like cancer, diabetes, multiple sclerosis, COPD, Parkinson's, stroke, etc. Number two, they assessed healthy aging by no impairment in memory. Number three, no impairment in physical function. And number four, they assessed healthy aging by these women if they were in good mental health. So they looked at the overall composite outcome, but also at these four individually. So what were the results? Looking at the composite outcome, total protein intake improved healthy aging, but the effect was far greater for those eating more plant protein. So overall protein, it improved healthy aging. Plant protein by a far greater effect. Looking at the marker of physical function limitations, all protein sources were associated with higher odds of not having physical limitation, but the magnitude varied greatly. So that for every 3% increase in energy from animal protein, there was a 5% higher odds of not being physically impaired. But with plant protein, there was a 41% higher odds of not being physically impaired. Then looking at the chronic disease risk, total and animal protein didn't really shine in this regard, but there was less risk of disease with higher plant protein, and with more plant protein, higher odds of the absence of chronic disease risk. So to summarize, more plant protein came out tops in all areas. And the study showed that replacing just 3% of your energy from animal protein sources with plant protein sources increased the odds of healthy aging by 38%. And I mean, looking at other studies as well, while total protein intake was mildly associated with lower all-cause mortality across various studies, plant protein intake is consistently linked to reduced all-cause mortality. So it definitely comes out as a top choice for longevity. Does this mean we should all stop eating animal protein and go vegan? Not at all. I'm not saying that at all, but I am saying that dialing back on your animal protein intake and replacing some of it with plant protein could be a really favorable move for you. That could mean having one of your meals a day, a smoothie with ProPeas in it. So I think it's all about finding a lifestyle that works for you and one that you can stick with and then optimizing it. So I think we all need to eat more plant protein, and I think ProPeas is a great choice here. And I was wondering, what could it be about the plant protein that is so beneficial? And I would say it is the protein package. When you eat plant protein, it comes with far more anti-inflammatory compounds. It's more alkaline forming. It has less IGF-1 stimulation, insulin-like growth factor 1, which can be a problem if it's too high. Maybe it's the protective effects of polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats and plant sterols. And of course, plant protein comes packaged with fiber. So the plant protein benefits are probably because of a good combination of all of the above in this protein package. Legumes have been shown to have major benefits for the gut microbiome. And one plant protein source that deserves a special mention because it was shown in the Adventist health studies, which were the first and most influential large studies to show major benefits of this protein for human health, especially in reducing heart disease and all-cause mortality. And do you know what that protein source is? The yummiest and my favorite, nuts and seeds. And the study showed that frequent intake of nuts and seeds, which was greater than or equal to 5 times a week, showed the greatest benefit. And the serving amount that was taken 5 or more times a week was 30 grams. So that is a small handful of nuts. If you're at the Woolies till along and you're walking towards the Woolies till, they've got those small little packets of almonds or cashews. That's 30 grams. So that smoothie bowl that I talked about last week, I always make sure that I add 30 to 40 grams of nuts and seeds to that, which gives one an extra 6 to 8 grams of protein. So concluding this section, you can be an omnivore and live a long and healthy life. You can be a vegan and live a long and healthy life, but attention to nutrition matters in both cases. Talking about vegans, there was a study called the EPIC Oxford and UK Biobank studies that showed that vegans with a low BMI, low calcium intake, and low protein intake had higher fracture risks. But it was not the vegan diet per se. It was that the vegans in this study had really poor quality diets. If you eat a healthy vegan diet, you can double the amount of calcium they were eating. You can double the amount of protein that they were eating. But their dietary quality was really poor. So it was not the vegan diet per se, but it was that these vegans were eating something like the standard American vegan diet. So for the vegans out there, there is high quality research showing that a well-planned, high-protein, exclusively plant-based diet can support muscle protein synthesis, hypertrophy, and strength gains just as effectively as an omnivorous diet when total protein intake is matched for. And animal-based diets do show greater short-term increases in muscle building after eating versus a plant-based meal, because of the higher essential amino acids, especially the leucine content. But single meal responses don't necessarily translate to long-term adaptations when total protein intake is sufficient. But I'm going to talk a bit more about that when I get to the information on leucine. So if your daily protein intake is high enough, especially from a mix of plant sources, then your overall muscle gains can be equal. And once again, remember, exercise is one of the biggest levers you can pull for health. So closing this off, whether you're vegan or omnivore, what matters in both cases is that you are paying attention to nutritional adequacy and that you are eating lots of plants. Get in your fruits, your salads, your raw veg, your cooked veg. These are all protective of our health. I mean, the Global Burden of Disease study, which looked at the dietary intake of people over a period of 27 years from 195 countries, and it showed that a lack of these plant foods, fruits and vegetables, etc., with all their phytochemicals and fibers, a lack of these contributed more to global mortality than removing junk food from our diet. So we need lots of plants in our diets. I'm not sure if any of you are aware of the very recent keto study that came out this year. And now this is a diet that is very low in plant foods, and very few plants are consumed, if any, when they take it to the carnivore extreme. It's very heavily animal-based. And the participants in the study were actually lean, they were metabolically healthy, and yet the primary outcome after just 1 year on this keto diet showed that non-calcified plaque volume, which was conveniently omitted in the official reporting, but it showed that there was an increase in non-calcified plaque volume that was 4 times greater than that in healthy comparison groups. So that's scary. Balance matters. We spoke last time about test, don't guess. Everyone is different. Different people respond to protein differently. So if you're wanting to know how you're doing with more animal protein in your diet, then testing your ApoB levels can shed some light on that. And you will see if maybe you do need to cut down a bit. Maybe you don't. If your ApoB levels are optimal, and other blood markers are fine, then your nutrition is fine. But plant protein definitely seems to help in shifting certain biomarkers that predict disease in a more favorable direction. ApoB, apolipoprotein B, is a very good predictor of atherosclerosis. On the ApoB topic, there was another study where they compared red meat, white meat, and plant protein, and they looked at what happened to blood chemistry. And the first two raised ApoB levels, and plant protein reduced it. So I think they recommend an ApoB level below 80 milligrams per deciliter results in a super low risk of cardiovascular disease. So eat lots of plants, some meat, absolutely sure, but as part of a healthy, active lifestyle that is plant forward. So let's move on to how much protein we actually need in the light of ProPE's giving us 12 grams per serving. Remembering that older adults need more protein to preserve muscle mass because the quality of our digestion goes down as we age and we don't assimilate protein like we used to. So, and that's where ProPE's can really shine. It's such a convenient way for older people to get in extra protein. So I'm going to talk about how much protein we should be getting. This is not something one needs to obsess about, but it's something you might just want to look at over a few days and see, wow, I'm actually getting in a great amount of protein. Or you may think, geez, I'm actually really underestimating how much protein I'm eating. And you don't need to obsess and weigh and measure, but it's something that it's good to be aware of. So the current RDA is 0.8 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight per 24 hours. And this is the minimum amount to prevent deficiency. It's not to optimize health, strength, and muscle. How does that look practically? So I weigh around 52 to 54 kilograms, which would mean that I need at least 41 grams of protein a day based on the current RDA of 0.8 grams per kilogram. Now, the tools that we use to come up with the RDA are apparently way out of date, and we actually need more protein than that. International experts are recommending that we aim more for 1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram just to preserve muscle and bone health. And then with resistance training added, most experts then recommend around 1.2 grams per kilogram is sufficient. And that's where one sees the most benefit. You might squeeze out a little more benefit with resistance training if you consume more, but that seems a good amount. When people were taking up to 1.6 grams per kilogram, in studies, it didn't show much more benefit than the 1.2 grams per kilogram. So that would be like me eating 65 grams of protein a day. I usually aim higher and aim for around 80 grams a day, which is actually around 1.6 grams per kilogram of protein. Some days I even go a bit higher, but this is definitely mostly plant protein. Sometimes some scrambled egg or some smash fish. Smash are your salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring. But definitely eat predominantly plant protein. And some of the fish more for the EPA, DHA brain benefits. I'm really not convinced that ALA is sufficient in a plant-based diet to prevent EPA DHA deficiency. And I'm also not convinced of the quality of any of the algae-based EPA DHA supplements in South Africa. Anyway, that's a whole different subject. But on a side note here, protein from fatty fish like these has been linked to decreased mortality risk. So if you're enjoying your animal protein, fatty fish is really a great option for your brain and your bones. So yeah, so around 1.2 grams seems an accepted amount for healthy aging and preventing sarcopenia. I've heard recommendations that once you're over 50 or postmenopausal, you might want to aim for a little bit more. A more recent study showed up to 1.3 grams per kilogram, showed an increase in lean body mass. And after that, anything more, the effects were modest. So I guess one just has to do the maths and play around and assess what works best for you. Yeah, so your daily amount is going to depend on your activity levels and your goals, etc. There are some proponents of low protein diets out there, one of them being Dr. Walter Longo. He's a longevity expert, and he bases his recommendations for low protein diets on the fact that lower protein understimulates mTOR, and then there's less cancer and less tumor promoting genes. But in the real world, there are just so many benefits of optimizing your protein, and a muscle-centric approach with sufficient protein is a huge component of longevity. So he emphasizes as well that plant proteins in general are not a problem, but it's more, or any proteins, it's more, the problem is more with particular amino acids, which are higher in animal-based protein sources and lower in plant sources. Example, methionine, which Phil talks about on the Inside Scoop, and that ProPES is very low in methionine. So yeah, so Dr. Longo's study showed that the negative effects of protein were mostly due to high animal protein consumption, and that plant protein was not a problem. When I looked into his recommendations, he suggests, and because he suggests too much protein can cause cancer, but the amount he was referring to was when 20% or more of your calories were coming from protein. And that is actually really quite a lot. So, for example, if I'm eating 70 grams of protein, which is a really decent amount, it's over that 1.2 grams per kilogram recommendation. So it's absolutely sufficient. And then I'm still only getting 15% of my calories from protein. So it's less than the 20% that he seems concerned about. So all seems good in balance. And we can aim for these targets to improve our health quite safely. Obviously, we always need to balance a variety of factors when it comes to our health. So if protein restriction gives a slight boost in longevity, it might not be worth it if it increases our chances of decreased mobility from muscle loss. So we got to weigh up all these options, and weighing up the cost benefit analysis, maybe a middle road of 1.2 grams per kilogram ideal body weight is a really good amount. So ProPES gives us 12 grams per serving. So if you're having 2 scoops of ProPES a day, you are going to be able to hit those targets really easily. One question I frequently get from our members about whey protein versus pea protein. So I wanted to quickly share a study here. The study compared pea protein supplements to a whey protein supplement, and it showed that pea protein promoted equal muscle gain to whey in resistance training programs. The conclusion stated that in addition to appropriate training, the supplementation with pea protein promoted a greater increase of muscle thickness as compared to the placebo, and zero difference was seen between the pea and the whey protein supplement. So we have established the importance of protein for bone health and muscle strength and preventing osteoporosis. But what about the theory of an acid-forming diet leading to bone loss? Let's look at this. I've been told and believed, and it's been a prevailing theory, that a high acid forming diet causes bone loss due to the acidity, and then the calcium is leached from the bones to counteract this acidity. Now, calcium is stored in the bones, and so the thinking was that we lose calcium from the bones. It's leached bit by bit, and then you end up with osteoporosis when you're on a very acid-forming diet. But if you look at the studies done on acid-forming protein intake and bone health, it is not what you actually find. There have been multiple meta-analyses and reviews that show no consistent link between a higher acid diet and lower bone mineral density or fractures. So the calcium which shows up in the urine could come from increased intestinal calcium absorption due to the protein intake. So for decades, researchers have been assuming that the calcium was coming from the bones with an acid-forming diet, or where else could it be coming from? But it actually turns out it's coming from what you're eating. So excess animal protein consumption boosted calcium absorption. So there was extra calcium around in the blood, and the kidneys are like, well, what do we do with this extra calcium? And off it goes to the urine. So the theory of acid-forming diets causing osteoporosis has been debunked with many studies. So we are not losing calcium from our bones with an acid-forming diet. So while this is true, Dr. Michael Greger from nutritionfacts.org, he has a different take on it. Well, not a different, but another take on it as well. He says that the long-standing dogma that an acid-forming diet leads to acidosis and loss of calcium from our bones is not true. But it does turn out that alkaline-forming diets do protect our muscles and thereby our bones. So this I found very interesting. A study that he cites concludes, consuming recommended levels of fruits and vegetables was associated with a 48% lower odds of low muscle mass. And he explains that the alkalizing effects of vegetables may neutralize mild metabolic acidosis, which has catabolic influences on muscle. And he explains that muscle wasting appears to be an adaptive response to acidosis. And then he shared another study that found that a more alkaline forming diet was positively associated with muscle mass in women aged 18 through to 79, suggesting a role for dietary acid load in muscle loss. So here we take away that we need to eat our fruits and vegetables. And fortunately, ProPeas is a very alkalizing protein. So there again, it's an excellent addition. So to summarize this whole acid alkaline diet theory, in one way, eating more alkaline forming foods is good for the muscles, reducing that catabolic effect of mild acidosis, and therefore it's good for the bones. But in another way, eating a diet high in fruits and vegetables, which is your alkaline forming diet, supports bone health, but not just because of the alkalizing effects, but because they provide so much potassium, magnesium, vitamin C, vitamin K1, phytonutrients. They reduce inflammation, which we're going to get into now. They improve calcium retention, and they support muscle mass, which protects bones. So your best approach then is to, yes, eat a more alkaline forming diet. Get in your adequate protein, around 1.2 grams is a safe amount, and do strength training. And this synergy helps preserve lean mass and prevent sarcopenia and reduce frailty. So balance, balance, balance. It always seems to come back to balance. When it comes to health, it's been consistently documented that whether you are vegetarian or vegan or omnivore or whatever, what matters most is that you eat a plant-forward diet. Less refined carbohydrates, less processed foods, less sugar, less saturated fat, and more plants. So let's continue with a few facts about what makes ProPeas so unique and how it supports bone health. Well, ProPeas was one of the first pea proteins ever launched into the marketplace, which represents AIM's focus once again on plant-based supplements. And this wonderful alkalizing protein improves calcium absorption, and that makes it a real great win for bone health. ProPeas is also very high in branch chain amino acids. These are leucine, isoleucine, and valine, and these are excellent for keeping the muscles that we have and preventing sarcopenia. And ProPeas also contains lysine, which is not a branch chain amino acid, but this one is vital. It's also in calcium because it's a component for calcium absorption and bone development. So I want to just talk about leucine for a second. And the reason I'm doing this is because this is a subject up for debate on social media these days, with influencers saying that you need high doses of leucine post-exercise. So I want to chat about this because many athletes query ProPeas because of this and say, well, they're going to rather stick to their whey protein because of this. So ProPeas contains 0.941 grams of leucine in one scoop of ProPeas. The general recommendation for adults is 2.5 to 3 grams per day, but that's just to meet your basic needs and not to optimize muscle building or maintenance. So those who may say that ProPeas does not contain enough leucine content, they are basing their views on the leucine threshold or leucine trigger theory. And this refers to the idea that muscle protein synthesis, the process your body uses to build and repair muscle, is switched on when the level of the amino acid leucine in the blood reaches a certain minimum threshold after a meal. And if it doesn't reach this threshold, then they say that muscle building is suboptimal. But here is a very important clarification. Research shows that a spike in blood leucine after meals does not guarantee muscle protein synthesis is now switched on. It's not just about the blood leucine levels. It's about sufficient overall protein intake rather than chasing these isolated leucine spikes. And to confirm this, there was a 2024 review that was looking into this leucine trigger concept. And they compared a whole food plant protein source versus a milk protein isolate. And it showed with the plant protein, yes, leucine was slower to rise in the blood, and it was lower in the blood because it's bound to a whole food matrix. But it still stimulated a greater muscle protein synthesis in the end. The plant protein did not affect any of the outcomes in the end. So it's not just leucine that matters, but whole foods matter. And while leucine is critical because it activates mTOR, the key switch that turns on muscle protein synthesis after eating or exercise, having high leucine in your blood, which happens after a high animal protein meal, it does not always mean more muscle protein synthesis. So studies are showing that that connection is not that simple, and that the bottom line is that we must focus on complete protein-rich meals rather than chasing these blood leucine spikes. Which leads me to another point about ProPEs. It is a concentrate. It is not a protein isolate. It is a low carb protein. It is low carb and high protein, concentrated pea protein. And so, because it's a concentrate, it comes with all the cofactors that are needed to make the protein useful. Now, protein powder isolates and concentrates are also produced in different ways, and isolates have to undergo a lot more processing. And then this over-processing strips nutrients and enzymes as well. So this extra processing of isolates also exposes supplements to additional chemicals and solvents, whereas a concentrate is the perfect way to not damage a protein. Protein concentrates are the least processed protein powder. So many athletes that consume protein powders are doing it in the form of an isolated protein. And whole food supplements are always better. The isolated ones are micronutrient poor compared to a concentrate. So the processing of ProPEs is also done by a purification process that includes clean membrane filtration. It requires only water to filter the pea protein. There are no harsh chemicals or solvents that are used. And so ProPEs is a very clean protein, and it's processed very cleanly. Not forgetting that it's also the yummiest and tastiest pea protein on the market. I've tried some others and none compare. So, to conclude all the protein talk, when it comes to protein and your general health and your bone health, get a good amount of protein in your diet each day. Try and aim for around 1.2 grams. That seems a safe and healthy and good amount. Have a bias towards more plant protein. Currently, 70 to 85% of adults in America get their protein from animal protein. And then the last thing, do resistance training 2 to 3 times a week. 70% of adults fail to meet that requirement. So let's leave protein behind us and let's move on to anti-inflammatory nutrition and bone health. I'm going to read the conclusion of 3 studies. Number 1, high C-reactive protein, which is a marker of inflammation. High C-reactive protein levels are associated with lower bone mineral density and higher fracture risk, particularly in older adults. Number 2, dietary flavonoid intake was positively associated with increased bone mineral density at the hip and the spine. Number 3, increased fruit and vegetable intake for just 3 months improved bone turnover markers and reduced bone resorption. So in this last study that I've just mentioned, the participants followed a low fruit and vegetable diet for 6 weeks, and then they switched to a high fruit and vegetable diet for 8 weeks. When they made the switch to the high fruit and veg, their bone resorption marker dropped significantly and their bone formation marker increased. Now listen to this. Both of these positive changes correlated with plasma carotenoid levels. Now, what do we know about carotenoids? We've often spoken about how your skin can take on a more golden hue, healthy glow when you have a high carotenoid intake. It's a marker of excellent nutritional status. So here we are seeing that they saw these improvements with bone markers and that they were correlated with increased carotenoid levels. Now, according to Dr. Joel Furman, nutritional expert and board certified physician, the quickest way to increase your carotenoids is to drink daily a juice mix. He recommends a mix of greens, cruciferous veg, beets, and carrots. How do we do that? You drink your garden trio and your cocoa leaf greens every day, because when you drink these vegetable juices, this quickly increases the level of phytonutrients, carotenoids, isothiocyanates. It increases all these things in your body's tissues. Now, what exactly are carotenoids? Well, they are fat-soluble antioxidants, and they are stored in the skin and in fat tissue. And your skin levels reflect your dietary intake of these antioxidants over weeks to months. So this makes it a very reliable marker for your fruit and vegetable consumption. And there are machines that can measure your skin carotenoid score. And so Dr. Furman recommends this juice mix of greens, cruciferous veg, beets, and carrot. This juice is designed to maximize your carotenoid levels quickly. So again, barley, carrots, beets, and cocoa leaf greens is going to help you really optimize that. The conclusion of that study saw that bone markers improve with higher carotenoid scores was that more fruit and vegetables reduced bone breakdown and improved bone formation based on carotenoid scores. So I thought that was very exciting. So keep drinking your garden trio and your cocoa leaf greens. So now here we're talking about anti-inflammatory nutrition. And higher markers of oxidative stress are linked to lower bone mineral density, suggesting that the antioxidant content of fruit and vegetables may be partially responsible for their bone health benefits. A 2021 study states dietary antioxidants show protective effects against bone loss and osteoporosis. So an anti-inflammatory diet that is rich in vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts and seeds, etc., is very bone protective. And reducing inflammation is essential to improving bone density. Now, talking about anti-inflammatory nutrition, we need to look no further than barley life as the ultimate supplement. We all know about barley's rich antioxidant profile, including superoxide dismutase and chlorophyll. But what makes barley life stand out among all the green juice powders is the care and attention that AIM take to produce it. I mean, with all the green juices out there on the marketplace, barley life, what makes it different, it's a leaf juice powder. It's not a ground leaf product. And greens that are simply leaves that are dried up and ground into a powder, they are cheaper to make, but they are definitely not as nutrient dense. It's harder to digest those cellular walls of the milled up leaf, so one gets less nutrients. And as Phil said in the Inside Scoop, we don't have the stomachs to actually juice it, but with barley life, the barley leaves are cut at a young stage. They are processed super quickly, They are macerated, breaking up those cell walls, opening them up and releasing those nutrients. What follows then is the concentrating of the juice, the spray drying it into a powder, which creates a more absorbable and bioavailable product. So, this juice powder that we have access to is just so superior, also because it's grown outside, not in a greenhouse. And so the plant is exposed to the elements. And when the plant is exposed to different weather conditions, it produces antioxidants to defend itself against threats. And so it has more nutrients. So growing outside is key. Once the plant is at its desired height, which is quite short, AIM starts harvesting. This is done in the evenings, as we know, because plants produce like an antifreeze for the plant in the cool evening that pushes sugars and nutrients into the leaves to protect itself from freezing. So this creates the most nutritional grass possible. When harvesting and it's cool outside, this also helps preserve the plants before juicing. They are harvested close to the processing facility, so transport distance is super short, and this also helps that the enzymes are preserved. And when it's processed at the facility, it is done so at very low temperatures. And the spray drying is done at very low temperatures to preserve the enzymes and vitamins. And so what AIM is doing here is maximizing every possible avenue to bring us the juice that is as raw and as natural as one can get. So AIM is all about preserving nutrients. Barley Life might not be certified organic. That's a question one often gets, because getting that certification is super expensive, and then that increases the cost of the product to us, the consumer. But the entire process that is done, it's done in the same way as it would be done under an organic standard. But AIM goes a step further than that, even to test for pesticides, herbicides, fungicides. And under organic standards, you don't actually have to test for those. So, as you can see, this is one nutrient-dense juice packed with enzymes, chlorophyll, antioxidants, superoxide dismutase, which is a potent mitochondrial antioxidant to neutralize damaging free radicals, high in chlorophyll for detoxification and cellular repair, rich in potassium, which is a mineral crucial for making it more alkalizing. Barley Life is super alkalizing to counteract the acid load of our modern diets. So when it comes to anti-inflammatory nutrition, Barley Life is foundational as an anti-inflammatory and alkalizing green juice superfood that supports bones by reducing oxidative stress and inflammation. I mean, I could go on forever, but I'm sure I'm running out of time. I haven't even been watching the time. So to conclude, build strong bones from the inside out, that nutrition that you get inside, as well as from the outside in with muscles. Strong bones require mechanical stimulation through resistance and impact. Remember, we spoke about jumping. Strong bones require essential nutrients like calcium, vitamin D, and vitamin K. Strong bones require sufficient protein. So maybe just assess where you are at there. Strong bones require anti-inflammatory nutrition to reduce bone breakdown. They require alkaline forming foods to prevent that muscle breakdown. And they require wise supplementation of what you may be missing in your diet. So everyone, you absolutely can reverse the trajectory of bone loss, but you have to fuel your cells and move your body and create a lifestyle that is sustainable for you. Yeah, and think long term. Some extreme lifestyles may feel good short term, but long term health is what we must focus on. And hopefully, this presentation has shed some light on how to do that in a balanced way. In the end, our lives are in God's hands, so do your part. The rest is up to Him. And finally, let me go back to where I started with my last presentation. It was an encouragement to you to find your why, your reason for optimizing your lifestyle. If you don't have family, then your why may be something completely unique to you, but it will be something or someone that really drives you. I mentioned mine, my son, and my daughter. And I recently came across an interview that my daughter did where she was speaking about VO2 max and grip strength as two of the most powerful research-backed predictors of healthy aging and functional longevity. And I'm watching away, and then she said this. I'm going to play you a clip. Firstly, she said something about me, and then she said something about all of you. It was an encouragement to me. Have a listen, and I hope that it will be an encouragement to you. I'm going to close with these two clips. I've just got to find how to share screen. And tick, tick, tick.
Knowing that she is fit and capable and healthy is one of the best gifts that she can give to my brother and I.
Yeah.
Things with a parent. And so, again, whatever age you are, one of the biggest blessings and gifts that you can give your family is just training and being fit and being healthy and being able.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.